Well, another change coming this week is that new European rules for COVID booster certs will come into force tomorrow for people travelling abroad. But this could lead to complications for those who have not received their COVID-19 vaccine booster, or indeed have had their booster but haven't received their cert. And under the new rules, travellers who finished their vaccination course over 9 months ago will need to produce proof of a booster shot or recovery from COVID infection. Eoghan Corry, editor of Air and Travel magazine, joins me now to explain. Owen, thanks very much for being with us. Will you
Good morning, Claire.
Explain to us about these new rules kicking in from tomorrow, the 9-month cut-off point for those who are travelling on the digital COVID certificate? What's happening?
Yeah, the background to this is some countries began to put a sell-by or a best-by date on the full course of vaccine before Christmas. Czechia was first to move. Austria, we're talking about 9 months. Other countries were talking about 6 months. As in July last, the EU got together and said we have to have a common strategy among the 27. The common strategy comes into force tomorrow. It's exactly as you say. If it's 9 months since you completed your full course, they will start looking for proof of a booster. If you don't have that, we're back to testing, which was the situation before July. You can still travel, but you will need an antigen test.
Okay, so I know we'll have people now counting the months on their fingers and trying to remember when they got their second shot if they need to. Will you explain to us what the cut-off points are? If people completed their first 2 shots, for example, in August, could they be in trouble?
Realistically, most Irish people got it in July, August, their second shot. So it'll be around St. Patrick's Day, it'll kick in. Health workers, though, some of them will have hit the 9 months before Christmas. Now, it's pretty easy to tell if you're in the system, and I'll come back to those outside the system because you did allude to it in your intro. But if you're in the system, you will get a new QR code. They didn't take the option of using the existing one. So and emails have already arrived to a lot of people. So it's a good idea. Just stick that on your phone and have that ready for your travel as of tomorrow. It might be a few weeks before you reach the 9 months, but once you have that, it's business as normal. They're being delivered remarkably efficiently, Claire. For instance, in one case I'm close to here, the vaccine was administered at 10:20 yesterday in City West, and the new QR code, which is the email with your digital COVID cert, that arrived at after 3 o'clock. And considering, as some listeners will know, the systems were down overnight on Saturday night with the vaccination, that was quite an achievement.
Yeah.
Outside of that,
now we know that is the case for many people. For some people, they're really struggling to get their updated cert after they've had their booster shot, and they're struggling to get through to the helpline. And the minister was here and he conceded that it was problematic to get through to get help. So for those people who don't have this booster updated COVID pass, what can they do?
Bit of a nightmare, as you say. If you've been into the big vaccination centre in City West, it's fine. If you're going to a pharmacist or a GP, the processing of that is slow, and it was slow for the digital COVID cert before. Waiting game is all I can say, but you remember that is you do have the option of the antigen test, and there are a lot of people who, for some reason, reactions, all of that, cannot get the booster. So they're back into where we were before July. Antigen test before you travel. Okay, it'll also apply to children, and there are different children regulations.
Okay, so that when you say antigen test, it has to be professionally administered. It can't be an antigen test that
Absolutely.
You take yourself. You mentioned children there, so tell me about the rules that apply to children for travel.
Pretty straightforward. Under the age of 12, test not required throughout Europe, but there are a couple of exceptions. The biggest ones for travel from Ireland will be Italy and Greece. But most countries under the age of 12, test not required. But we have a situation most summer where teenagers were being tested. I don't see any change in that. I don't see a sort of an opening of all the doors for travel within Europe. And remember, this is important. We're only talking about travel within Europe. Outside the European Union, different regulations. To another important rider, in the Omicron scare before Christmas, or when medical authorities were not sure exactly what was going to happen next with it, 3 countries introduced testing, which is still in place. They are Portugal, Greece and Italy. So even if you have your digital COVID certificate, you will still require a test before travelling to those 3 countries, Portugal, Greece and Italy. The cost of the test has come down, by the way, and the difference between antigen and PCR, most listeners will be very familiar with how complicated PCR is. You'd have to do it the day before and get the result overnight, but antigen, people are doing it at the airport and flying.
Okay, and one other problem that people may face is if your passport is coming up for renewal, you could be one of 1.7 million people who are in the same boat. Now, 1.7 million people looking for passport renewals may spell trouble.
Big trouble. There was people deployed from the passport office last year, and there's a second thing going on here, the Home Alone, where you're counting the children on the way to the airport, counting the family passports the night before and finding one is out of date. A child's passport
worst
goes
nightmare.
out of date.
Yeah.
Goes out of date in 3 years, a child's passport, so it goes very quickly. It's okay. The upside of this is it's possible to get an emergency, but you will need to know. It's not the night before is not when you're going to have to look for it. It's also it is also possible to track because everything is done online. It's very easy to see when your passport is due, and most of my experience is being that even when the due date looks a little bit further out than is comfortable, it has been delivered in time. We saw something very odd happen over the weekend where a lot of the due dates were pushed back. I'm not sure why that is happening. Is the passport office under undue pressure? And another very important thing, newborn children, some people are waiting for the PPS number to apply for the passport. As soon as the baby is born, and if you're going to travel, make sure you put the application in for the passport, because getting a first-time passport is more complicated, and the support documentation also involves sending the parents' passports to avoid that situation where you have no passports in the house and you're flying in a week's time. It's pretty important to get it in early. I don't see a way of clearing that backlog easily, and what they're telling me is that they are outperforming the targets they've set themselves, and I certainly see that they are being delivered a little bit faster than some of the due dates.
Okay. Owen, I have a couple of questions coming in here to you from listeners. So John says his wife received her 3rd vaccination in the USA. She only has a CDC card as proof. Can she register this with the HSE to get an up-to-date certificate for travel?
There's a facility for updating yourself, for logging onto the website and updating changes to your COVID certificate. That would apply. It would mostly used for people whose name on the COVID cert is different from that on the passport. But I'm not sure it will apply in this case. Okay. I would imagine that you will be bringing that documentation to the airport gate. And once the big questions are not going to be asked at immigration in the country that you land, they're going to be actually asked at the airport gate, because you have airline staff vetting it. So make sure you have that documentation with it. But I would actually chase down an HSE, an official digital COVID cert, because you're dealing with somebody with 189 passengers to load, and they have the power to deny you boarding if they suspect you're not going to be allowed in.
Okay, Owen, a listener would like to know, how long will we still have to fill out the passenger locator forms going abroad? Do we know at this stage?
I don't think they'll be going away soon, Claire. That's an opinion. They have proved, governments like them, and you've got to remember almost every one of the 27, I think 25 of the 27 countries have locator forms. Sometimes very hard to find the link for the locator form. Airline sites are very good. Ryanair is particularly good at guiding you straight in. But also don't fill out the locator form too late in the day. It gets complicated. There are 8,000 municipalities in Spain, and you have to put the municipality in. So don't be putting in Cambrils when you mean Salou. They also, some of them will ask you for the date of your first vaccination. The one for Canada asks you for the date of the first vaccination. They're all manageable. But they take a little bit of time, not something to be done when the stress levels are high and you're just about to head for the airport. I do think locator forms will be around for a while. I also think masking on aircraft will be around for a while. Aircraft industry, they're trying to protect their own staff and they're trying to keep their reputation intact from criticism from health authorities around the world. And we saw what happened with Cathay Pacific when a government takes a dislike to an airline on their safety record.
I have a couple of messages in about children aged 12 to 15, and this listener says there's no news of when they're going to be allowed to get a booster, but I want them to get one now. I think that's an EMA issue. It hasn't been approved at that level yet, so it won't have been approved here.
There is a point though, Claire. It is your 12th birthday, not your 13th birthday. So if under 12 means really under 11, that's something that's caught a few people.
Okay.
It's the 12th birthday.
Because as this person says, if we travel in the summer, we have to pay €60 each to have them tested.
No way around that. Testing of teenagers is there. I had a good discussion with the Spanish Minister for Tourism about this only last week, and his basic point is every country in Europe has been to hell and back. They're not going to take shortcuts on their health requirements. But the reality is that the age group, the age demographic, which are getting the vaccination rollout, it leaves the family market a little bit behind, and testing is likely to stay for children who are not, for teenagers who are not vaccinated. Remember, after your 12th birthday in most countries, like the main country, 70% of our holidays go to Spain and Portugal. Over the age of 12, you will require either a certificate or a test. Below that, you're fine.
Yeah, so many questions coming in on this. Will a certificate from Australia be accepted in the EU? Surely you need the EU one, don't you, Eoghan?
Okay, I don't know offhand the what's recognised of the non-EU ones. The EU one is recognised. The obligation is to recognise EU certificates by all the EU countries, EU 27. The British certificate, which will apply to listeners from Northern Ireland, has been accepted on a case-by-case basis by countries like Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece. But you could run into a situation where the NHS cert isn't recognised. There's still some European countries don't recognise it. In the other direction, there are 60 countries around the world who are not in the European Union who recognise the EU cert. It's a good one to have, but there's a lot of, to answer the Australian question without answering it specifically, the way it works is reciprocity. The EU does deals with Australia. You recognise our cert, we recognise yours. I'd be quite surprised if Australia isn't in that process. If it's not recognised already, it probably will be in the coming months.
All right, Eoghan, thanks very much for taking all of those questions on the fly there. Eoghan Corry, editor of Air and Travel.
Always a great pleasure, Claire. Thank you.
Magazine.